As a parent, the Connecticut tragedy hits home as particularly heinous. What perspective should we view the event from? What's the silver lining here? Also, it seems the gunman dying during the crime is getting off extremely easy. What repercussions, if any, does this soul face? What's the process for all of the souls involved in the event?
Desiring a silver lining is very dualistic, so we're not going to go there. Because silver lining is opportunity for learning, which no one can really hear right now, so that question's off the list. Where's the perspective you want to view this from? So first we have to do some truths, okay? Here's truths, right? First truth, painful, devastating, tragic, emotionally crippling, horrific, heinous. All these things are true. From a body perspective, those things are true, and we could probably keep that list going for another 3 days and come up with new words every single time. So the first thing we want to say to people is don't feel like you have to let that not be true. Even if you don't believe in victimhood, even if you know that there's reincarnation, even if you believe souls make choices to come here, all those things don't take away from the fact that children were killed. And that affects people. Whether you knew them or not, whether you're ever going to know them or not, doesn't matter. It affects you. So there's just a moment to say, I'm human. I have a survival instinct. I have a heart. I have children in my life. I have, fears of my own. And I have a reaction to this news that's powerful, that's intense, that's strong. And that acknowledgement, we want to be really clear, that acknowledgement doesn't need to be like a 20-second acknowledgement. That might take a day. It might take 2 days. It might take a month. And it's okay for those things to happen. Now, here's the tricky bit. It's okay for you to be in that acknowledgement place. And you also need to concurrently be in the place that recognizes there are no victims, everybody's a creator, and there is purpose behind this. Now that is not easy, and it's really hard when you're emotional, and it's extra nearly impossible probably if you're actually physically involved. We understand that. However, there's purpose. There's purpose to everything. And by purpose, we mean there's opportunities for soul growth. There's opportunities for soul growth. And the opportunity for soul growth that specifically is illuminated here is that sense of there are very troubled people that are sharing this planet with you. And they are offering a example of dealing with their troubled selves to the oneness, to the brotherhood, to the entirety of man. Now, most people would probably say that the way he chose to deal with his troubled nature, troubled experience, troubled moment isn't okay. And in that you can say, all right, where in me am I troubled, and the way I deal with it is something I want to change. You don't have to take a gun and go to a school or some other similar thing. You don't have to act out in that way. You have to look at, or you don't have to be at the point where you would act out in that way to have a level of uncomfortable in your body that you're still trying to deal with. Whether it be struggles about money, struggles about love, struggles about your body, struggles about your health, struggles about your family, or whatever it is, every single one of you has some trouble. We call it your own personal tsunami that you're dealing with on some level. And it's how you deal with that, of course, how you navigate that, that's what's really going on here. So when you see someone act theirs out in such a dramatic and painful way, one of the ways that you contribute healing is by checking in with yourself about the things that you're internally processing. Now, on Wednesday, we talked a lot about the fact that you're like a radio station. And we're going to be talking about this a lot coming up. What is in you comes out of you. What is in you comes out of you. Some people make the choice to have it come out of them in very violent ways. Other people make the choice to have it come out of them in ways that are energetically violent or energetically unconscious. And we're going to be doing our best to illuminate to all the people we're working with ways that their energetics are coming out of them in ways that if you knew it, you wouldn't want it. So this man acted in an outwardly violent way that was particularly difficult in that it came at this time of year and it was children and it was so many and all those things. And the illumination that we hope that it brings to you all is a sense of connection with everyone, because when that happened, you feel connected to those people even though you don't know them, which is the truth of oneness, and gives you an example of how that inner turmoil that you each face and you each battle with can be externalized. And energetically, we have seen, and we'll tell you, we have seen energetically violent acts that if you saw them, you would think they would be on CNN, simply from people sitting in this very room. If it could be played out on CNN, it would be, because it would make news. We've seen it. And we don't want to see it anymore, and that's what we're helping you guys with. We're going to be working on that a lot in the coming months. Now, what was the bit about he got off early because he died or something? Got off easy?
It seems the gunman dying during the crime is getting off extremely easy. What repercussions, if any, does the soul face?
Okay. I'm trying to decide how to handle this because John's in the room. And we're not going to pretend he's not. So John, you're going to have to use the microphone because this is too important of a subject to not treat with full attention. When you say that
Can I say? I know we've discussed similar things before.
You don't talk.
Okay.
Not yet. Not yet. When you say he got off easy, can you say more about that, please?
Kind of it's, had he lived, it would have been, he would have had a really intense earth lesson here, with a lot of outpouring of rage and whatnot. It would have been a whole different experience versus, shooting yourself and checking out.
But that has the assumption that shooting yourself and checking out, as you said, is a less intense experience than staying on Earth is. That's an assumption, and a rather big one, and a rather inaccurate one.
Yeah, I don't think I meant it that way.
You just said it though.
Huh?
You just said it though. Well, that's why we gave you the chance to say it.
Do you want to listen to what I say or what I meant?
But it illuminates a really important point, and that's why we asked you to speak in the microphone, is because especially when you have an example like this, you have to watch the assumptions, because the assumptions align you with mob mentality. And especially in a situation like this, the last place you want to be is aligned with mob mentality, right? So the assumption that he got off easy because he died in the attack cannot be assumed, right? So an interesting question would be something more like, what was his experience? Which we're not going to go into, but that would have been a more interesting question to us, right? Because we've got all of your experiences to deal with, so we're not going to go into his experience. If we end up talking to him, we'll talk to him someday. Probably you won't be there when we do, right? So we just want you guys to watch your questions, especially in the next few months, right? Because you guys all come on Wednesday, and you folks that participate with us, be extra careful about your questions, because your questions are going to be either aligning you with mob mentality, they're going to be aligning you with habits and baggage, they're going to be generating static, like the first question we had, right? It generated static. Do you understand how that first question generated static? Does anybody, hopefully someone understands. So watching your questions. So with all that, since you happen to be here, ask your question. One question about this this guy in the shooting.
Can I qualify it first?
Sure.
The problem is I was more curious than triggered. So I knew there was the possibility that I would get called out on it.
Yeah.
So I kind of knew that. But my question is more of a review of it's kind of what happens when we die sort of question. Like obviously there's a bunch of souls just passed.
Yeah.
And their processes are going to be different. So I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah.
More than anything of what they're now facing.
Yeah.
As well as being empathetic, how I originally started as being a parent, that's just, and as you said, that just brings the oneness into it because you just you can immediately identify with that.
Yeah, and you can immediately identify, hopefully, with both the murdered and the murderer because you're both as well. If you talk oneness, you're both. You're both the murderer and the murdered. The killed and the killer. If you're oneness, you're all of it. Now, that's an advanced teaching that maybe a lot of people can't swallow, and we understand that. And if that bugs you, we totally understand, and let it sit. Put it to the side. Say, I don't want to think about that yet. Don't tell me I'm the murdered and the murderer. If you're in the oneness, you are. And of course, that's painful to imagine that you're part of a collective consciousness that would allow something like this to happen. But you're also the part of the collective consciousness that has compassion and love and enjoyment of children, even if you're not a parent. You don't get to be one and not the other. But how do you navigate that is the interesting part to us. And that's what we're trying to teach you guys, is how to navigate that. You're in the river. You're all in the river. The river is all of you. How do you navigate? Do you want to not run into the rock? Okay. You don't want to be a murderer in this lifetime? We understand. We hope most of you feel that way. How do you avoid hitting the rock? You avoid it by living consciously. That's why we talk to you guys all the time. Right? And what happens after they die? They are all reviewing what they learned, just like when you die, you'll do. They're all reviewing what they learned. And we said earlier, we've seen energetic violence in this very room that is on the caliber with that violence. And that may shock you guys, but because you guys don't see it. That's not your job. It's our job. And we've seen it. And it's been uncomfortable. But we don't see it often. And it abates as time goes on because we learn together more and more. But we've seen you be mean to yourselves in a way that's equal to how mean that guy is to himself. Oh yeah, absolutely. We've seen it over and over and over and over and over again. Why do we only have one rule, you can't be mean to yourself, is to cut back that crap right off. If we could just cut out the be mean to yourself, we'd be 95% there. But we've been harping on that for 10 years and it hasn't sunk in for some of you, right? You'll still do it occasionally, not as often. So what happens after you die? You review what you learned. You review what you learned. What happens while you're living? You're reviewing what you learned. It's not that different, actually. Now, again, it's different to the human form that has feelings and emotions and family and love and triggers and survival instinct. We get it. We're not discounting that at all. At all. But we're also saying there's more. When you're ready, there's more to look at, right? Somebody's saying here, and the children's experience compared with the adults. As souls, you're not a child or an adult. A child a soul contemplating its child personality selves and its adult personality selves learns different things. But it's not, as a soul, it's not as big of a difference as for you guys. Talking about the ones who weren't killed, the ones that did survive, a little bit different, right? Because adults have more coping mechanisms. It's not going to be easy, not by a long shot. It's not going to be easy for any of the people who are affected by it, right? People are still affected by JFK getting killed. People are still affected by the space shuttle blowing up. People are still affected by September 11th. It doesn't go away, but it does bring more into the picture of what you can learn from. And we've said it in the past, it's sandpaper. It seems callous to bring that up right now, but it's still true. It's a very coarse sandpaper, but sandpaper shapes the wood, and events shape you. Both the events where those children were loved and the events where those children were lost shape the people involved. And if it makes you more aware of how much you love those that you love, that's a gift. You asked something else that we did not answer yet.
I don't think so. No, that was kind of the last bit of it.
No, there was something else. Hang on. You asked what happens after you die.
The other souls. Something about other souls. What's the process for all of the souls involved in this event?
Yeah. What's the process for all the souls involved in this event? Is that we're all growing, us included, because we're involved in this event too. Veronica experienced it, right? You guys experienced it. So we're experiencing it too, and we're involved too. And we're not saying yay by any means, not even close, not even a nanosecond of that. What we're saying is that it happened, so let's learn. Let's grow together from it, and don't deny that impulse to lash out, to wish it was different, to want your life to change so desperately that you do desperate things is not part of all humans. It's how you handle that. And some people do what that guy did, and some people put a bunch of drugs in their body, and some people kill themselves, and some people just be mean to themselves for the rest of their life and say mean things to themselves all day long. You're violent, is what we're trying to say. You are inherently a very violent species. You have to be, because you have a survival instinct. It's a violent thing. But when you don't have to worry about killing each other for food, you're violent toward yourselves. And you're energetically violent all the time. It's crazy how energetically violent you guys are, really. We've never really talked about it. We've never brought this up before today. But you know how sometimes, we did it a little bit with you earlier, but this wasn't exactly that situation. You know how sometimes people will talk and we'll just interrupt them and we'll say, no, don't go there, because that's a weird energy? That's kind of what we're talking about. And we have a whole exercise planned probably for January to help you guys see this better. Because it's time. It's time for you to start seeing. If we could literally have a magic wand and let you guys see the energetic patterns that we see, that's the superhero power we would give you in a heartbeat. That'd be the first one we would give you, because if you could see it, you would stop doing it. And that's why we tried to talk with our exercise on Wednesday, where we tried to let you see what you're doing. Right? Because somehow if we get you to see what you're doing, we think it'll be easier for you to stop doing the adding static in. So in the first question, if she had been here instead of in Germany, we could have used you guys, and as she asked that question, we could have put you in her face and been like, now you had clarity until you said that last part of your question. Now you have to try to see through John. Good luck. He's not see-through, right? So we are going to have more and more. Veronica said it's the beginning of the movement meetings. We're going to have movement meetings. Just be aware. We're going to move you guys around so that maybe physically you'll start feeling what we feel energetically. So Mindy's asking, I wonder if there's any truth to being grateful that since that part of the oneness did the heinous thing, I do not have to. Now, we wouldn't say it quite that way, Mindy. The way we would say it is, because it happened, it is now part of your collective consciousness, and you did not have to be the perpetrator in order to learn from it. Because being the perpetrator is a more heavy-duty energetic than being the learner from it. But you've all been the perpetrator and the prey. You've got enough incarnations in you. And you've got enough incarnations where survival was iffy. You've been the perpetrator and the prey many times. Ezra asked, I wonder why we are so violent. Maybe because our truths are not being accepted. You're violent because you have a survival instinct, because you want to stay alive. Staying alive is a violent thing. You have society, so a lot of times you may manage to stay alive without having to be violent. All we have to do is turn the electricity off for a year. You see how violent people can be. You're very calm right now. This is calm. You turn off the electricity, it becomes, it becomes guns and muscles really fast. You all of a sudden don't have running water, guns and muscles really fast. Have both those things happen? Your violence is tempered by the fact that you don't have to use it to stay alive. When you do have to use violence to stay alive, you have violence. Do you watch TV? They make shows about it every day, right? Pick any of those cop shows. And a lot of those cop shows are all about the violence of people who feel like they have to protect their turf. Same thing. Most of the people we get to talk to are middle-class Americans, frankly, middle-class Europeans. And you don't have to fight to stay alive. But if you did, you would. The other day, Veronica was talking about the idea that even though she pretty much doesn't eat that much meat, she does eat some meat now, but pretty much doesn't eat that much meat. And she's never really had to slaughter an animal. Had to do fish once or twice, but never had to slaughter anything else. She says, I know without a shadow of a doubt, if all of a sudden there was no grocery store, it wouldn't be long before that cow right there and I and a big sharp knife were going to meet each other. Because she knows she would do it to stay alive in a heartbeat. It would be awful and she'd probably be throwing up and crying the entire time, but she would do it. And so would you. I don't care how much you think, oh, I'm a vegan, I'm a vegan, I'm a vegan. Takes a while to grow a squash. In the meantime, you'll be starving. You will do things that you never imagined you would do now. Or you'll die. And guess what? We know how strong your survival instinct is. It's not necessarily that you're violent as much as it is that you have a survival instinct that says, we've done this before. We know how to stay alive. And yeah, it's a win-win or you won't. We talk about that a lot, right? The oneness, win-win, all that stuff. And those things are able to be studied because you have grocery stores. Let's not be mistaken. Without the grocery store, we would be doing the things that we did back when there were no grocery stores, which you would be learning about yourself through the movement of the moon and the movement of the sun and the turning of the seasons and the taste of the soil and the birth of animals. You'd be learning about yourself through those experiences instead of now you get to learn about yourself through the experience of Facebook and coming to meetings and, paying off your credit card bills. And frankly, now you have a little bit more spare time, and that little bit more spare time gives us the opportunity to study these things more deeply. If all of a sudden tomorrow you all had to go be farmers because there was no more grocery store, we wouldn't be able to have Wednesday night. It would last for maybe 6 months. And then you guys would be like, I cannot come to the meeting. It was harvest day for the wheat. And I worked 18 hours, 4 days in a row. And I'm not coming to the meeting because I have to work 18 hours today too. That's what would happen. And you would learn things about yourself while you harvested wheat. But you wouldn't learn what we have to show you now. And owning that is really important. And being grateful that you're in a time when that is possible is really important. Because it's a fact. So yeah, that's why we have the warrior on the council. That violence is in you. And the warrior's really good at teaching you ways to manage it that honors it and honors that truth of you and also honors the fact that you're in a time when there are grocery stores. So that urge needs to be used in different ways than it was back before grocery stores. Right? Did you have something more you wanted to ask about that? What about you, girls? So. You guys want to add in? Can you use the microphone? Yeah. Switch chairs.
I just feel like after all that, I need a little hope.
Yeah.
I mean, because you've really stressed so much the survival instinct.
Yeah.
And I really want to get somewhere else beyond that.
Okay, so what we have to remember here is the survival instinct is about the body. The body, survival instinct. Cannot divide them. We don't feel like we can divide them. Maybe someday we'll divide them, but that's not a high priority. Right now, the priority is managing what the survival instinct offers you so that it becomes part of learning. Just like this thing that happened at the school, we're going to use that for learning, right? Same kind of a thing. We're going to say, what is, and I'm going to use it for learning. So in our book, under the survival instinct isn't actually an accurate thing. It's fact of survival instinct. You're female. Fact of female, right? Yeah. You learn differently than John, who's male. It's just a fact, right? So fact of survival instinct, and then not letting that fact of survival instinct somehow be the fact of you, meaning it does not run you. You allow it to inform your journey, not run your journey. And that's the difference between acting out on that violence you have inside yourself and acting with it, like the warrior teaches you guys, with it to create in your world. And if it's not like a light switch, right? Or we wouldn't have had to be here 10 years. It's not a light switch kind of a thing. It's an opportunity, right? So the hope here is that people look at what happened in that situation and others like it and say, okay, this brings up in me, I really do cherish children, or I cherish this, or I love myself, or I want to spend more time with my friends because you never know what's going to happen, or it creates in you an awareness. It kind of falls into the category that's summarized by breast cancer saved my life. It falls into that category. And if this experience those folks had, and the people who experienced that have with it, can say, I'm going to use this after I get done processing the body pain stuff we talked about in the beginning, I'm going to use this to facilitate me having more of the life I want to have by helping me know what is a top priority for me to pay attention to, right? That's a good, the president said, right? Michelle and I are going to do what every parent's going to do, which is hold my kids closer and be more grateful for the love we share. Awareness of what's important. Awareness of what's important. And when you come across someone who's having a hard time, the importance can be to take a little extra time to not shake their shoulders and tell them you know all the answers for them, but just to say, is there something I can help you with? Because there are lots of people who aren't on the brink of shooting up a school that still could use a smile. Even just a smile, even just a hello can make a real difference in the overall, collective experience. So the hope here is the hope of awareness, and some honesty about how you feel inside, the rage people feel inside and where they direct it. Because the rage people feel and where they direct it, a lot of times is this inner thing. And if you imagined every time you said something mean to yourself, you cut a piece of your skin off, you guys would be dead, most of you. I'm so mad at myself, I feel like, I don't deserve to have an arm, or something. That's what it looks like energetically. It's like you get mad at yourself and it's as though parts of you are no good. It's weird. And we're going to work harder on that with you guys. So Nancy asked, what is the state violence transforms into as the collective changes? And that violence, just like we talked about on Wednesday, where fear can turn into, when you recognize that fear is an extremely good and loyal companion, and instead of you letting fear tell you not to do everything, you let fear inform you when you really need to not do a specific thing. Instead of it, don't do anything because it's too scary, it's don't put your hand on a hot stove, right? When we start to get fear in the proper place, this, what we're calling violence, that urge of violence, is very similar in the sense that it can be a great motivational force. And it's also the thing that sort of gives you that I'm sick of tired being sick and tired place, right? It gives you that I'm going to change my life place. But if, like we talked about to Connie's question, if you sit on it and store it up and be like a volcano and don't act in small ways, or wait till you have all the answers, it tends to explode in ways that either look like yelling at your spouse, yelling at your kids, kicking the dog, or acting out in ways that you're not necessarily getting the results you want or that you feel pleased about in the end. So you're going to be, we don't want you to put violence in the category of it's a bad thing. What we want you to do is recognize that the underneath thing that exhibits as violence is a very powerful drive that can be used to create in your life rather than be squashed and then explode. So it's the dissatisfaction with something that likely was a contributing factor to what happened. There's a dissatisfaction there that was dealt with in a violent way. So we try to get down to what that underlying dissatisfaction, that underlying fear, the underlying survival instinct, the underlying habit, whatever language we use, what's underneath, and try to deal with it at that level so that you don't have to save up where you yell, cry, scream, have some kind of an explosion within yourself that is labeled violence. And then the violence wants to be attended to when it's the underlying stuff that's really the driving force. Fear is the same thing. We're looking at letting fear and frustration and anger, whatever we end up labeling those down there stuff, they can be motivators to right or correct or high vibrational conscious action rather than a explosion after sitting on it for too long or eating away at yourself because you don't want to correct that energy. Would it be nice if you guys could get these sorts of learnings without having that kind of an experience happen? Yeah, sure. Of course it would. And will you get to that point? Most of you already are. Right? Most of you already are. So far, that's not the common way of handling your anxieties. So if you want some hope, right? It's not an isolated incident because it does happen, but it's not common. It's not frequent. It's exceptional. And some hope would be that it freaks so many people out that you go, wow, that's not an option. I may be upset today. I may be scared today. I may be sad today, but I don't go there. You know, I don't actually hurt myself. I don't actually kill myself. I don't actually take a bunch of drugs. I don't actually. What do I do? Well, I'm mean to myself and I worry a lot. Okay. Well, when you think about it in those terms, you're mean to yourself and you worry a lot. Okay, we can help you with those. So there's 300 million people in America, and a really big percentage of them are handling things in ways that don't involve that kind of stuff. So there's your hope. And the ones that do, there's ways of addressing that we talked about today. And making sure that when you expose yourself to the media's coverage of it, you're really aware of where the mob mentality wants to take you. Because the media tends to be the dictator of mob mentality. It's going to tell you what it wants you to feel. And you got to be really careful if you decide to agree with what the media is telling you to do, to feel, how to be. Be really, 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 really careful about that. You can trust your own self more than trusting the news. You don't need to know the details. You don't have to have the pictures. You know enough. This happened. Okay. That's all you need to know. Now, grow with yourself. The details of it, the pictures, the interviews, what else is that going to give you? And that's a real important question to answer. What will more information actually do for you? And some people are, but I want to understand. It's not understandable. That's not a goal. It's not an ambition. Right? Because you try to understand it. Why? So you can match energy with it? No. I am going to be in my right relationship with it. And that can involve compassion and sadness and fear and all those things that are normal. And it also involves the other things we talked about. But if you watch the media, they're going to tell you how to feel. 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 And then you have to fight not only that, but you have to deal with the original stuff too. So you got to be careful about that, because there's a real strong temptation to be like, I need to know the whole story. You'll never know the whole story until you're out of body. And then you'll know enough, right? Because then you'll be tapped into the oneness and you'll be prepared to handle the whole story. Because the whole story won't just include so-and-so did such and such. It'll be so-and-so was a child himself at one time and had these experiences. And you're not prepared for any of that. You're not prepared for the whole story. And don't think the media has enough of the story to make you feel better, safer, more secure, understand, correct in your judgments. The media doesn't have any more of the story than you do. It just says it in lots of different ways. Got it? Anything more we need to talk about on that?
I was just struck by the exact parallel between Connie's question and what you were describing about his experience, of blowing up. And, she was saying that she would hold things in and until she would, blow up.
Yeah. Wasn't happy with the way that her expression. Yeah. That's a good point. That was a more conscious, perhaps, discussion of the same kind of it comes from the same place in the human, that I don't know how to express what I'm feeling.
And the energetic attacks, that's just that's just like the same thing.
Yeah, if we could paint the room. We're working very diligently with the entire council on coming up with ways beyond yelling, cussing, and laughing, which have been our palette thus far, to illuminate just how radically you guys are doing energetic violence. We're going to use that word violence because, frankly, it triggers you. And you need to be triggered about this, because if you're triggered, then you'll deal with it. If we just say, oh, you're being mean to yourself, you guys are like, oh, probably. If we said, you're being violent right now. Wait, me? Violent? I'm not violent. Okay, that'll get your attention. See, we'll use whatever we can, right? Because we have to. That has to change. It has to change. You guys can't keep doing it. You can't ascend something you don't love. You can't integrate something that you don't like. If you say, oh, I suck, your soul's like, can't go in the oh, I suck department. There's like a big metal door, like a bank vault door. Whatever's behind the I suck wall, the soul can't get to. The soul can't integrate with. The soul can't connect to. We better answer some more questions or we're going to be here till tomorrow.
Yeah.